Hi, welcome back Couchside. I'm Carly of Gnarly Carley Gaming, and today I'm going to be talking about Wandering Galaxy from Plaid Hat Games. This is a new game in a series of games that Plaid Hat has created that are really story-rich adventure games. First, there was Forgotten Waters, which I played years ago, where you're a ragtag pirate crew out on different missions depending on the scenarios you play. Then there was a new iteration, Freelancers, and Freelancers was kind of the D&D story version of it. You're all kind of an adventure party, and again, depending on what the scenario prompts you to do, are out to defeat a baddie or track down people, different adventures throughout. The third implementation takes us into space, and this one is Wandering Galaxy, the name of this vast galaxy that players live in. They're basically immediately put in debt as they acquire a spaceship and are out to do different jobs and on adventures to basically scrounge up enough profit in order to pay off their ship and kind of have freedom within this vast galaxy. So what you have with this series is three very different thematically story-rich adventure games that play very similarly to one another. So I had started this series with Forgotten Waters, then played Freelancers, and now Wandering Galaxy. And so this video, I'm going to focus on Wandering Galaxy, but I'm also going to reflect on how it's different from those other two experiences. I started playing this series way back when Forgotten Waters was released, and in that game, you're a bunch of dastardly pirates. You compete to be sort of the most intimidating pirate of the bunch, and you all have your own backstories that are really rich and silly and fun. And these backstories shape what you want during the game. Everyone's trying to level up and gain skills and basically fill out this constellation web that gives you the best ending possible to your story. That is, if all of you or any of you survive the game. And the game itself came with a bunch of different scenarios, so you could replay, but essentially you'll go on these adventures trying to give yourself your best ending to the story. And throughout it, you'll read as you level up what's happening with your character, and at the end of the game, if you all survive, you all read out what your fate ultimately was. The writing in Forgotten Waters is incredibly silly, and we just had a ball with it. We laughed a lot when we played, and there was 6 of us at the table, all in this crew, and I just remember having an absolute blast with it. So when Freelancers came out, I immediately was interested, and when Wandering Galaxy came out, I was immediately interested, just trying to capture that kind of feeling we had around the table. Now, one of the issues that I had and other people had with Forgotten Waters is the length of the game. These sessions you could pause, but any of the scenarios, if you made it through and did well, could last 3 hours or even a little more, which is just beyond the edge of really what big game experiences can be in a given sitting. And you never knew when to pause. You could choose to pause at any time, which was great in the story, but if you did, you kind of were left in this haphazard place of not knowing if you had 10 minutes left or an hour left. And so it could be a little disjointed or unsatisfying for some groups, or frustrating if it's a little too long. I think Freelancers tried not only to capture a new theme, bringing like a D&D world into it, but what they really tried to do is reduce down some of the upkeep of the game in order to make it a little shorter of an experience. Now, I had a harder time with Freelancers myself. I think if you like a D&D light adventure, if you're trying to bring new youngsters into the gaming fold that might like a D&D adventure, that it could be good. But what they did is they cut down on some of that writing and intrigue and backstory of the characters that really made it an individually rich experience for me in Forgotten Waters. It was a little spiffier for timing, but still quite long and still had the pausing issue. And so, not to say that these games aren't rich experiences, but I saw Freelancers as a step back from the Forgotten Waters world I liked. This could also be a factor simply because I love a good pirate theme and I'm less enamored with a generalized fantasy world. But in either case, I still liked Forgotten Waters more and wanted to see another experience more akin to that. Now, where does Wandering Galaxy, the game I wanted to talk about, fall into all of this? In Wandering Galaxy, like I said, you're a crew that has just bought a spaceship that you need to pay the debt off of in order to have free reign for your own destiny in this vast galaxy. And in this game, instead of just different scenarios, you have a 4-part scenario campaign. What this means is that a group, instead of playing one scenario in a sitting or maybe 2, will have 4 different sessions that they go through. Each are kind of a game's length that make up a full campaign story. Now, this will end and your story will finish up if you ever make 7 profit enough to pay off your ship. But there'll be different adventures along the way, and players will have concrete journeys to go through within a game space. The choice to make Wandering Galaxy a 4-part campaign gives a lot of space for rich story and character development without bogging down a single play session. What this looks like is a more reasonable length campaign session will have a decent amount of story, but then at the end we'll have a pause where characters will get to upgrade their ship together. But then, notably, each character will get some injection of their own story. Now, in the game, every character will pick a different creature to be. I was about to say person, but not every player is a human in this game. And they all have their different backstories and skills, and they'll get to introduce themselves to the crew at the beginning of the game, but at the end of each campaign session, their story will grow richer and richer, and everyone involved at the table gets to have this experience. So rather than having it be a pause and interjection throughout the whole story, kind of like Forgotten Waters was, in a single session, which just gets to be too long. And instead of stripping it out the way Freelancers does, Wandering Galaxy inserts, I think, the best of this story back in, but does so in a way that is more enriching for everyone. The deficit to this choice is that it is a campaign, it's a 4-part session, so it's a longer experience to get through. And this just works or doesn't work depending on your group. It's only 4 play sessions, which is a relatively reasonable campaign. This isn't a Gloomhaven adventure with about 60 sessions to get through to the end. And so I think most game groups reasonably can make it through this story session. If you like story-driven games, if you want a taste of a campaign, if you're trying to get a young gamer into story-based adventures, I think Wandering Galaxy is a great fit, and I would say a step up from the Forgotten Waters and Freelancers experience, just in terms of management alone. Now, what does this game look like? In Wandering Galaxy, you are all a crew on this spaceship trying to amass profit. In a round of Wandering Galaxy, what players typically will do is choose to travel to location or stay at the location that they're in. In either case, once they are settled in, players in turn order will usually and very quickly have to assign all of their standees to different actions within this booklet that provides options for players to engage with wherever they may be in this galaxy. Players will have under a minute to figure out where they're all going. Some actions are restricted to only one person, while some can have many, and some can't be accessed at all, or may even be required for players to do, meaning last to choose might have to do it. Many of these encounters and interactions will have skill checks of sorts. Basically, they're going off and trying to pull something off in that world, whether that's fighting someone or negotiating through things or bluffing. All of these things that you'll do, a lot of times you're pulling skill checks for. Different characters are built differently and have different sorts of skills, but in any case, when any character performs a skill check, they'll have a deck of cards and they'll pull 3 of them, showcasing different symbols. Each skill check needs certain symbols in order to pass. So you might want 5 or more of 2 different types of symbols. If your character is good at those things, it might be easier to pull off than not. Other players can stress out to help you out, essentially putting crappier cards into their own deck in order to give you a boost in the immediacy. And with that, if you're successful or you're not, you'll essentially enter a code in an application, and that code will tell you what happens, interject more story. All of these are really incredibly voice acted if you want, or in Wandering Galaxy, though it wasn't true for Forgotten Waters and Freelancers, there's actually going to be a booklet that you're able to back and get if you'd rather just read the adventure yourself. You can also just not have the sound on and have someone read the app too. But if you don't want to use tech at all, that will be an option with Wandering Galaxy. I personally think the character acting in these games have all been fantastic, so I like to have the app read it to us. It lets us all giggle as a group and kind of relax and be, rather than reading and heads down the whole time. That's my personal preference. But you go through all the options, everyone has an encounter. Sometimes this builds you up as a player, sometimes it can hurt you or help you as a group, but you're all working towards your goals. In Wandering Galaxy, largely that's paying off your debt, and so you'll acquire different jobs throughout the game, which kind of give you quests to achieve to gain profit. You largely start off the game, and this is the lightest of spoiler that isn't a spoiler really, but you'll start off the game with a really crappy job that you can go down, which is more of a fetch quest that introduces you to the game's mechanics, but also pushes you towards things. Later in the game, and there are dozens of different options of jobs, you'll acquire more of them based on the actions you choose. And this is kind of how you work your way through the galaxy, finding these different paths to build wealth and chasing them as best you can. The game gives you this beautiful galaxy map board, but very often in the game when you arrive at location, there's submaps within the books that you can also travel on. And in this way, there's a lot of room for growth in this world, but also it's just a massive world for you to go through and explore. You don't always know what you're going to get when you try to go somewhere. You can go to a place and it's a much vaster place than you even imagined, and you still have to hunt within it for what you think you're looking for, even if you're at the right spot. So it's a very cool and big space adventure. I like the subsystems because it feels like space. I know I'm heading towards something roughly, but then I actually have to navigate my way throughout it. And what I think is very cool, which is similar to Forgotten Waters and Freelancers, which they've not lost, is everyone has a role to play. And it's not just your character with your backstory, but in these games, everyone's given responsibilities. It used to be responsibilities on the pirate ship, then it was like adventure party responsibilities, and in this one, it's roles on the spaceship. And all of these different roles come up at different times. There'll be interactions that happen in the game that'll say the person who's managing science and the experiments that you're doing on board get to make a choice, or whoever is doing operations gets to make a choice. But all of these different systems come into play throughout the game. You have to manage your supplies, your resources, your cargo. You have to manage your power. And if you don't have enough power, for instance, to get around the board to fuel yourself, you may have to rely on your life support or your supplies to get you through and fuel your ship. So managing all these things and making sure you all don't die is also a big part of the game. And that part is a really fun dance. It gives everyone an investment in something, but also because there's a bunch of these roles, it means that everyone gets to learn something and be responsible for something at the table without feeling overwhelmed with having to know all of the pieces right away. You should explain the rough gist of everything to everyone around the table, but make sure that each person who has their roles and responsibilities knows what they do. And then they can become a vocal advocate at the table. They can be involved. They can lead the charge. And I think that's why I like these games so much, is it's a story, but it really and continuously brings everyone into the fold. Everyone has their interactions. Everyone gets to contribute. Sometimes there's, in this one in particular, even group skill checks where more than one person have to pull together in order to pass something. And I think that kind of group dynamic is why I like gaming so much. It's a social experience. It's a really joyful experience. And Wandering Galaxies gives a lot of room for geekiness in the game. I think my favorite addition to the roles and responsibilities that I love in this one, because a lot of them feel very familiar to the other two games if you've played them before, is the science. And I said it first anyway, but you can do research projects that you can advance throughout the game when you work on the ship. And when you finish advancing a science project, you get to read the entry for it and discover a kind of breakthrough for you and your crew. I'm not going to speak to any of them because I think that would be a disservice to the game and the surprises that await you. But I think there's a lot of joy in the different roles and adventures ahead in this game. Now, I will say I was only given a preview of it, so I basically had the equivalent of one play session rather than having the full 4 campaign. So I can't say how this story will end, I can't say how satisfying it will be for all the characters, and I can't speak to that writing on the whole. But in general, I think the caliber of writing is about the same as before. I still think it's on the more youthful side of writing. So if you've played things like Oathsworn with a very dark and serious undertone, this isn't that. There's a lot of levity, there's a lot of silly, there's even like potty humor and other things. So it's not for a group that takes themselves too seriously. But if you want to relax into an adventure with folks as adults, or especially if you're trying to bring like 12 to 15-year-olds into the fold of gaming and adventure party games, I think this is a great place to start. And if you're asking me, Forgotten Waters, Freelancers, Wandering Galaxy, I think they're all very similar experiences, and I'm not boosting Wandering Galaxy up in tearing those down. I try to offer the ways in which I see them improving through these series, but I also still think my soft spot is for Forgotten Waters, because that's just the theme that I love. But if you're into space and these grand adventures or loved the other games, this is another one from Plaid Hat that might be for you. But that is it from me today. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about Wandering Galaxy, and otherwise I will see you all for the next video.